Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pawkettian Fundamentals of Guitar video series. We are on video number 14, and today we are going to talk about learning how to read chord diagrams, and then we're going to start by playing a D major chord. And if we get to it, we'll get to a couple other major chords as well. So one cool thing about the guitar is that the guitar is kind of like a portable piano. It is cool because you can play single notes, which are melodies, right? Which is what when we learned how to play a scale, this is how we pluck out melody notes, like one note at a time, right? Or it can also play what's called harmony, which is playing multiple notes at the same time, multiple notes played at the same time. In fact, three or more notes played at the same time is what is called a chord in music. So you need three or more different notes played at the same time, and that is going to be called a chord. Now, there are multiple kinds of chords in music. The five main types we have are what are called major, minor, dominant, diminished, and augmented. These are the five basic what we call chord qualities. Today, we're going to start by learning how to play a D major chord. But before we do that, we have to talk about how to read the diagrams. So there are two sheets you can be looking at right now. The first one is the one that looks like this. It says Comprehending Chord Diagrams. It's in one of the PDFs that I sent over. Comprehending Chord Diagrams. And the other one you can be looking at is this one called the Common Open Chords, right? And we're going to be focusing on this chord D right here. It's also the same chord that is in the Comprehending Chord Diagrams right here, right? So there it is. So what I'm going to do is, why don't we all take a look at the Comprehending Chord Diagram sheet. And I'm going to read this off to you now, and we're going to kind of talk through it so we can figure out and make sure we know how to read the diagram. So here we go. Comprehending Chord Diagrams. A chord diagram is a graphic representation of the guitar neck that shows you exactly where to put your left hand or your fretting hand fingers. Now, if you're doing it flip-flop, so it would be where to put your right hand fingers. But most of us, as far as I know, in this class this semester, we are using the left hand as the fretting hand. So if you're not using the right hand, everything's just kind of reverse. Figure 1-2, which is the figure below on this page, right, shows the anatomy of a chord diagram. The following list defines each of the different parts. Let's talk through the checklist, right? First check mark. The capital letter above the diagram indicates the name of the chord. Additional letters or numbers that follow define the chord's quality. For example, minor, seventh, and so on. So if you look down at the diagram, it'll say a chord name, and it says the capital letter D. If you see a capital letter, this means the chord is major. If you see a capital letter with a little lowercase m or a lowercase letter with a little m, this means the chord is minor. If you see a circle next to a chord, that means it's diminished. If you see a plus sign next to a chord, that means it's augmented. And then dominant chords can look a little bit different. They can have just a plain 7 next to it, or a 9, or a 13. So, a lot of times, also with chord symbols, you'll see numbers. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 11, or 13. We'll get to talking about what those mean later on, but they mean that you're taking notes from particular scales and adding them together. So the first thing is the capital letter D means that it's a major chord. That's going to name the chord. Okay, second check mark. The grid of vertical and horizontal lines represent the fretboard as if you held the guitar upright and faced the headstock. So what you do is if you take the guitar, you hold it upright, and then you face it. So I'm actually just looking at my headstock right now. So what it's going to be doing is just looking at like this little cross section right here. So if you look at the diagram, the top line you'll see on the little diagram, it's a bigger, thicker black line. That is the nut. This right here. Okay, that represents the nut. The 6 vertical lines going up and down, right, represent the guitar strings, with the leftmost line, the line on the left, being the 6th string, or the big thick string, old thickie. The 5 horizontal lines going across represent the frets. The thick horizontal line at the top is the nut. This is what I said before. So the first fret, where you place your first finger, is actually between the nut and the next horizontal line. I talked about this in the other videos. Like, this is the first fret, this is the second fret, this is the third fret, and so forth, right? Okay, next check mark. Dots on vertical lines. And you'll see if you look at the diagram below, there are black dots on there, right? And it's the same if you look at the common open chord sheet. Dots on the vertical lines between horizontal fret lines show you which notes to fret. So this means these dots that are on here, the black dots that are on the sheet, we have to push down those strings on that fret. We'll talk about this in a second. An X above the string means that you don't play it. This is the next check mark, right? If you see an X above a string, it means you don't play that string. And if you see a 0 above a string, it means that you play it open or unfretted with your left hand. The last one, check. The numbers below the diagram indicate the left hand fingering. Now, the numbers below the strings on the comprehending chord diagram sheet, there are some numbers you'll see below down here. In the other page that I showed you that shows a bunch of different chords, the common open chords, I did not put any fingerings on there. So as we go through and learn the chords, I'll give you optional fingerings for certain things. So if we're going to play a D chord, here's what we do. Now, first of all, before I say anything, in order to form a D major chord is made out of the first, the third, and the fifth note of that major scale. So if I played a D major scale and took the first note, the third note, and the fifth note of that scale and played them at the same time, that is how a major chord is formed. We'll get to that later. I just wanted you to make sure you understood where it came from. So I want to read this diagram. First thing is, I go string by string, left to right. So if I look down all the way on the left-hand side, the line going down is the 6th string. Right, the one all the way on the left, there's an X above that. That means I do not play this string. X above it. Second thing, I go to the next string over, the 5th string. There's an X above that as well. That means I'm not going to play the 5th string. Next string, the 4th string, if you'll notice there's a 0 or an O above that string. That means we're going to play that string, which is the 4th string, which makes sense. That's a D. Open. Open. We're going to play that open. Good. 3rd string, there's a dot on the 2nd fret down. Now, on the comprehending chord diagram sheet, it's also at the bottom of that string, it says 1. So we're going to take our first finger, and we're going to push down the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. And now I'm going to play the 3rd string, or sorry, the 3rd string and the 4th string together. 4th string, 3rd. Here we go. I'm just going to take the pick and kind of go through those 2 strings. Next, the 2nd string, we have to push down. There's a dot on the 3rd fret, and we're going to use our 3rd finger, our ring finger. So we're going to push down the 3rd fret on the 2nd string. Now I have the open 4th string, the 2nd fret on the 3rd string with the 1st finger, and then the 3rd fret of the 2nd string with the 3rd finger. Last but not least, there's a dot on the 2nd fret of the 1st string, and we're going to use our 2nd finger, middle finger, and put it down here. It's going to feel a little squish, but we want to make sure you arch the fingers and get all these down. Now, if I play all 4 of them, this is what is called the D major chord. You want to arch your fingers, make sure you're not bumping into the strings, make sure you're pressing hard enough, make sure your nails are clipped. Get your thumb behind the neck, get your arm down, take the pick, swipe through the 4 strings, and hopefully your D chord sounds like this. Now, it looks the same in the other book on page 10, the common open chords thing, except for on that page, you'll see one of the dots, the black dots, is circled. That means that that note is also what's called the root note. It means that that note is D. That's one of the difference between the two diagrams, is that on the other sheet, the common open chords from the book that I wrote, I circled all the notes that are what we call the root note or the root. So hopefully this makes sense, how to play a D major chord. You want to go through and make sure you can pluck each string one at a time. And then it sounds nice and crystal clear. Coming up, Pawkettian 15, we're going to learn how to play C major, E major, A major, and G major. Have a great day!